companies who value women, companies who value people of color, begin to create an atmosphere where they're better able to see the entire world.
All right, Anjuan, thank you so much for being here. It's so good to see you and hear from you again. We go back to our MBA program at Texas A&M, where you probably remember me most because you carried me through a few different group projects. But but you have such a cool career trajectory, and I always you were like the wise sage in our MBA program. So I wanted to take this opportunity to sit down with you and have an interview on your career trajectory and some of the perspectives that you have on leadership. And I just think it's a really cool opportunity for my students to hear from you. So first, just thank you for being here.
Thank you, Scott. I'm really happy to be here. And what I remember you from MBA days is that you got one of the cutest girls in our class to marry you. So that was your that was your superpower, my good friend.
That's funny. That, in all honesty, that probably is how most people remember me from the program. It's and I think even to this day, people refer to me as Kathleen's husband above any other title that I might have. So that's
exactly
funny, and she'll be happy to hear that too. So thank you. But I mentioned that you had an interesting career trajectory, and one thing that I think is so cool about you as it relates, especially to my MBA students, is that you've kind of been able to make this transition from, you're this tech guru, you worked in software for a number of years, and you made this transition into leadership. So I want to ask you about that, but I want to embed it in kind of, what are you doing today? And then if you can kind of tie into that, how you made that transition from producer to leader, I think that your story can really resonate with some of my students.
Absolutely. So today I'm a technical program manager, and that means that I'm responsible for delivering projects. And that's not just the business side, which is gathering the business requirements and then creating some kind of specification and creating a plan and then executing that plan, though I do a whole lot of that. But that's really owning the entire solution. Who's going to work on this project? What are the technical details? What kind of backend? Okay, this is a cloud product, so we need to make sure that we have our cloud team involved. We need to make sure that we have developers for not just the actual software, who are going to build the solution for the customer, but we're going to need some infrastructure. So right now, I'm responsible for the entire solution, from the business side to the technical side. And so my team's very in size based on the project. I could have a team of 20 people. I could have a team of just 2 people. And so that is my current role, some of the things that I do. Now, how did I transition from being a producer to being a leader? I had the distinct benefit of working for a company called Accenture, which many of your audience may have heard of. And Accenture is one of the biggest management consulting companies in the world. And it was like that when I joined the company, several years ago, not to date myself. And really built into the Accenture way is really a up or out model, just to be honest. And so you came in as an analyst, and that's where you were learning to be a contributor, to learn how projects ran. So you might be a developer, you might be a tester, you might be a designer, but you were responsible for contributing your part of the project. And then you would go up to be a consultant, and then to a manager. And when you're a manager, that's when you're not an individual contributor responsible for doing work, but you're responsible for the entire work. You're responsible for the plan. And so a large part of my career, that progression from being a producer or an individual contributor was really built in. And to be successful, you had to make that adjustment. You had to really ascend the corporate rungs of the ladder in order to really stay in consulting. And so I had the benefit of working in a model after I graduated with my degree in electrical engineering to go into Accenture and up through the path of becoming an actual manager, team lead.
That's interesting and also honest. So thank you for that. Kind of the progression was built in, and like you said, it's almost like for us as academics, the publish or perish model. It's you either thrive or you're kind of forced out to do something different. I'm
Mhm.
trying to think about, and maybe I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of some of my students who don't have the luxury of working for a big firm or a firm that's really planned out this leadership path for them. Do you have maybe through your own experiences or just your own personal insights, any tips for how to kick that door down if the path isn't well defined for you?
Absolutely. And so I've had the benefit of working for these large multi-billion dollar global companies like Accenture, Deloitte, and a couple of others. But I recently, in the past 5 or 10 years, started working for smaller companies. And so I'm actually, the last few companies were small in terms of like less than 100 people. And so while I joined these companies as a senior manager, slash technical program manager, I worked in an environment where there was not that structure. And actually, one reason that I was drawn to working for smaller companies was realizing that I had demonstrated the ability to be successful at huge companies. And I wanted to see, could I operate without that safety net? Could I walk this tightrope without all the massive resources and structure of an Accenture or a Deloitte? And so I was able to make that transition from my success at big companies. And I took all the rigor and all of the discipline that they really drill into you when you're working for Accenture or for Deloitte. I was able to apply that at a smaller company, but I also wanted to do something else. I wanted to leave these companies with my fingerprint on them. When you're working for Accenture, when you're working for Deloitte, it's such a massive machine that it's really hard for any one person to really feel like they had a demonstrable, measurable change on the company, right? How the company approached its products, how the company approached its customers, how the company approached its people. And I want to have that opportunity. So I worked in smaller companies where there wasn't that structure. And so making that leadership leap is something that I helped others do because I had to build the structure of what leadership success looked like at these smaller companies. And so a few of the points that I learned by coaching others is one of the best ways to be promoted to a leadership position is to operate at that leadership position. And that means that as you look at the people who are where you want to be, see what they do, see what kinds of problems do they tackle, what kinds of questions do they ask, what kinds of relationships do they build within the company, and if you can get a view outside the company and begin to operate at that level. So if you have someone who is your maybe senior manager or supervisor, or maybe you work for a VP, begin to ask, well, what are some of the things that you work on? Oh, you have a budget. Do you mind if I spend some time with you, maybe over coffee, understanding the budget process? And so show that curiosity. And a lot of people are passed over for leadership positions because people think that they aren't interested. And you may assume that people know that you want to be a leader, but it's up to you. You have to show that you have that hunger, that eagerness to be a leader. And you'll be surprised that a lot of people who are in leadership, they really feed off that. If they see your hunger, if they see your eagerness, they're like, okay, I want to invest in this person because they've already convinced themselves that they want to make it. And then as you learn more about and then give it out, to continue along this example of a budget process, say, hey, I hear that you do a weekly report about the budget. Maybe I can do some of that for you. Can you run me through how you pull together the data? Okay, you have this Excel spreadsheet and you have this pivot table. How does that work? So you know what? This will free up a couple of hours of your time. I'm willing to make the investment in order to learn this. Why don't I create this budget for you, this budget forecast, and then I'll present it to the board or to the executive team. And by doing that, by finding ways to understand what people who are where you want to be operate, and then by aligning yourself with those operations and then working in those operations, you'll begin to show that, oh, this person is actually doing the things that we want our leaders to do. And then when it's time for a promotion, then hopefully it should be an easier conversation because you're actively demonstrating that you can lead. You're not waiting for people to give you that opportunity.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. So then, like you said, not only are you saving them time through letting them offload some of their current responsibilities to you, but you're probably also saving them time in trying to build you up as a leader once that role does become available. So I love that advice. I think when I was working in tech, one of the mistakes that I made, I kind of tried to do a really good job on my projects and just thought opportunities were going to come to me. But the problem with that was that when you're doing a good job, they reward you with more work in your current role, but not necessarily advancement because they don't want to lose you as a producer. So you really do have to make an effort to go out and show that you have some competency or capability beyond what you're doing today. So I love that advice and I think it's just fantastic. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
The next topic that I want to broach, I think, is really interesting in today's environment, and you've demonstrated a lot of expertise in this area through a talk that you have called Lending Privilege. And what I love about this talk is that you've actually made your presentation public, right, so that other people can learn from what you're speaking about. You have a book. Minority Tech, that's kind of a collection of a curation of your thoughts on minorities working in tech and in tech leadership. So particularly, and I mentioned the current environment with the famous anti-diversity memo at Google, right? This is something that we see all the time in the news. And it's something that as especially my MBA programs move on and go to leadership roles, we need to be thinking about diversity and inclusion because we always hear about tech companies making these great strides. And I think Google at one point was probably an exemplar for this, which is why it's so interesting that that really a light was shined on what's happening at Google. So I was hoping that you could help illuminate what are some of the big problems, and then maybe we can start to tap into some potential solutions for improving diversity and inclusion in tech. And I honestly think a lot of this is going to be generalizable to other industries as well. So I'd love to hear your input here.
Absolutely. And for those of you who have not seen the talk, Lending Privilege is my talk about diversity and inclusion, but it's really my talk about culture and teams. And every company has a culture. Every team has some team identity that is really a composite of all the values that the people who are on that team bring to it. And I have been convinced over the past few years that diversity and inclusion is an important corporate value, something that companies should really champion. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that study after study has shown, and this is something that I've looked at for years, and more studies are coming out. In fact, the Harvard Business Review a couple of weeks ago, where I can put this into the show notes to be shared, published an article showing that the article showed what many other articles have shown is that when you improve the diversity, when you improve the representation of women and of minorities, whether that's Black, Latino, et cetera, that you get better outcomes, that you get more diverse and innovative solutions, and that company performance overall, it also goes up. And this is especially true when you begin to move the ratios. And we have companies like Google and Facebook and others who publish their diversity numbers. But as the ratio of the people, whether that's women, again, whether that's people of color, go closer to the representation in society, you get better business outcomes. And I mean real business values, all the things that we studied in business school, revenue, profit, et cetera, and so forth. And so all the business measures that executives really, that's what their jobs are based on, to become more profitable, to increase revenue, et cetera, and so forth, that these all are positively correlated with having a more representative workforce. And so I think that the real business outcomes that we have found in study after study are so real that companies should value it, if not for any reason, then for that reason. And then there is the reason that companies who value women, companies who value people of color, begin to create an atmosphere where they're better able to see the entire world, right? The representation that we see in most companies, and I work in tech, and so it's more glaring here. The world is not all one demographic. The world is roughly 50% women. The world is very brown and is becoming browner, and that's the reality of the world that we live in. And if you don't have the points of view of the world as it is and as it is increasingly becoming, then you'll be out of touch with the people who have buying decisions, who you want to buy your products or services, out of touch with the ability to create technologies that will appeal and meet the needs of these customers. And so it's really important for companies to have those different perspectives. And, you know, we've all, this is a very well-known example, but there was example of a webcam, probably similar to the one that you're using now, that did face tracking, right? That as you moved around, it would track your face. And this camera did not work for dark-skinned people, which shows you that they probably didn't have dark-skinned people doing the QA or doing the testing for this camera. And so there's not a lot of people who have dark skin or even, you know, slightly brown skin who are going to buy this product. So by having a lack of the diversity, you've wiped out entire demographics in people who may want your product or service. And so I think that those are the very real reasons that diversity and inclusion is truly important. And my talk really shows that if we, and by we, I don't mean companies, I mean people, people who are probably watching this, if you can look at your company and realize the value of diversity and say, I want my company to be profitable. And if you work for a company, I hope that you do, or you're an MBA student and you want to work for a company that is profitable, but it has all these business benefits, then diversity and inclusion is something that you should care about too. And that you can make a difference. You, through your own individual daily work, can help your company become more inclusive, more diverse. And so my Living Privilege talk is all about that, about how people, not companies, because I think companies are always going to be, I won't say blinded, but they're going to always be distracted by competing concerns. But I think it's the people who are going to be able to do what I call lend their privilege. Lend the things that, you know, either as a man, and there's the idea of male privilege, that men get access to benefits based on simply being male. And that might be, hey, there's a pickup basketball game every Friday after work. Why don't you stop by? And those opportunities to network and to build relationships often are often center maleness. And so how can we break down that male privilege and let it matriculate to people who simply don't have that male privilege? And if you're in a position where you have leadership responsibility, what can you do to make sure that people who aren't like you, whether they don't have your gender privilege or whether they don't have your racial privilege or other privileges, how can I make sure that everyone gets access to the opportunities that naturally are drawn to me simply because of my privilege? And, you know, working as a man in tech, I'm so aware that often express their concerns that they're not given the opportunity to show the amazing things that they can bring to their companies. And, you know, women tell me their stories of how they change their outfits 3 or 4 times in the morning before going to work, because they're like, well, maybe this is going to show too much this, or maybe this is going to not let me be seen in the best light. And so they began to second guess their wardrobe. Now, I don't know about you, but I spent about 30 seconds deciding what to wear. I'm like, if I'm clothed, that's good. All right, I can walk out the door. But so often women are burdened with these concerns simply because they have to work around the the restrictions that often companies put on women simply because they're women. And so those are a couple examples of why I care about diversity and inclusion, and the ways that I think we can all be aware of our own privilege. And everyone has privilege. That's why I think this talk has been so successful, that everyone can do something to make the industry in which they operate more diverse, more inclusive, and therefore more profitable and wealthier, and have better outcomes for your company. And you can do it starting today.
That's so awesome. I think, and you went pretty deep into that. Not only did you talk about kind of what we can be doing, but also you really motivated the issue and talked about how these have real positive business results associated with diversity and inclusion. So I think that's fantastic. And I'm sitting here, I'm not in a management position right now, but I probably will at some point in my career be a department head, and of course, like an assistant department head. And I'm a white male. So one thing I'm trying to think about from a tactical position, what kinds of things can I be doing? So I think you've talked about things like thin slicing, where we kind of make judgments about certain groups of people, and we have this first impression, and that can really shape the entire interaction. It could be a 5-year interaction that we have with someone, but if we make bad assumptions about them, the first time that we meet, that can have a really detrimental effect in the long term. So what kinds of things should I be doing as a white male? I'm in the group that probably has the most privilege to share, but how can I do that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think that there are a few things. One is being aware, and really the fact that you're asking this question shows that you're further along going down this road than I think a lot of your peers, a lot of people who you'll meet, your co-department heads, will have in that they're aware that there are things that happen in our industries that often make women question their position. And to be honest, the whole Me Too movement, right? This amazing movement of people just speaking up and saying, "This has happened to me." People who are bearing witness to what they've experienced when you have people in positions of power who abuse that power. And the fact that it's just so widespread, right, shows that, and I fully believe that Me Too and the issues behind Me Too are issues of diversity and inclusion, meaning that we had a more diverse and inclusive, not just entertainment industry, but technology industry and all industries. If there was more representation, if women had people who were high enough up in the organization that they can talk to and get guidance from and hopefully protection, then I think we would see a dramatic decrease in these incidents. But to answer your question about what you can do, one is being aware, and then you'll have people in your department, and you'll probably have women, and being aware even in meetings, you can make a difference. And you'll often, if you just take the time to step back, I've experienced this where a woman who is the expert in a topic doesn't speak up. And that might be because men, we tend to monopolize the conversation. And in most of these discussions, most of these, corporate meetings, it might be 60, 70% men. And simply by that percentage, there may be almost a silent conversation or a silent directive that, hey, this is a place where men speak. And by saying, hey, maybe someone named Judy or Shakeen or something like that, hey, you wrote a great white paper about this a couple of weeks ago. Why don't you share something about this topic? And this happens too when men will hear a woman say something, ignore that woman, the conversation continues, then a man says the exact same thing that the woman said a few minutes ago, but then that topic is explored. And so being able to say, wait a minute, this is something that Lisa said a few minutes ago. Let's make sure that she gets the floor to further explain it. So, those small actions of realizing that, hey, there may be something in my company's culture or even my team's culture that is causing women to feel disempowered, be an empowering force to counteract that. One thing that I've done is, and I work in tech, and I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great women who are tech leads or who are over our DevOps team or over our infrastructure team. And when I have the opportunity to go speak to my executive team, I bring them with me. And these executive team members benefit from the hard work and the intelligence and expertise of these women, but they often don't even know who they are. And so much of companies, promotions and pay raises, all of that goes along relationship. I mean, they go along relationship lines. You may not believe this, but a lot of the perks, a lot of the benefits of companies, they all flow along relationships. And the fact is that our relationships in our companies are a reflection of the relationships in society. And those relationships flow along gender lines. They flow along racial lines. They flow along all of these lines that mean that power and access to it is often restricted. But if you bring people, if you lend your privilege, if you lend that your access to the executive team meeting, where you bring someone with you, say, this is the person who did this. I'm going to give my talk and I'm going to do my job, but I'm going to make sure there's time on the agenda for you to hear from her. Then by doing that, you're helping to position her to have that relationship that will help to propel her in her career. And so those are little small things that don't take a lot of time. They're not really that hard to do. But if you do make that investment, even though it's a small one, and you don't no, you don't lose anything by doing this, then you really help to empower those people who are less privileged than you, and you enable them to have access to the opportunities that you enjoy today.
Wow, that's awesome. And it's very powerful, even though, like you said, it feels like small actions. Even for me, like the wheels are turning in my head about things I could have done better in the past in terms of, including people who worked on a project and kind of deserved credit, but we feel like because I worked in tech for a long time, but because I'm the tech lead, then I kind of eat up that credit, in the meeting with the client or whatever it is where, I probably should have been more thoughtful. So it's awesome. And I think that you're going to give my students a lot to think about. And I'm also thinking about, so we have all these kind of small changes we could make, invitations to the discussion, kind of pausing the discussion to shine a light on something that's really important or someone who's really important. What are some of the bigger things we can do? Is it mentoring programs or hiring practices? Where can we have a really big lasting impact?
Oh, wow. There are so many ways. And I always try to boil down my talks to things that people can do today or do soon. Because I think that when people hear about diversity and inclusion or culture, like, well, that's for HR to handle, right? That's for the executive team, the people being paid all the big bucks to take care of. And I really encourage people to have a different view, to say, no, I can do something. This is something that I care about. Because I may not be othered in this way. I may be a man in tech, and there's lots of men in tech, but there's some way that I'm probably othered. There's some, and it could be my religion. It could be who knows. And so the same access that I find myself sometimes denied, if I lend my privilege in ways that I have an advantage, then that opens up the playing field for hopefully everyone to come in. And maybe that person who I join the conversation by joining the culture of my company, they may open up some way for me to get into areas of access that I find myself denied. So I really do think that it's a win-win scenario. So some way that we all win. Now, some of the things that everyone here can do, and if you're an MBA student, it's something that you may want to wait until later, but look at your company's website, right? Your website gives you a picture of who you value. And a lot of websites use stock photography. Some actually take pictures, which I encourage, of actual people who work at that company. And make sure that that is a representative, that is a diverse and inclusive representation of your company. So include women, include people of color. If there are people who are differently abled, in a wheelchair, maybe with a hearing aid, include those people too. Because simply by showing those people on your website, you're saying this company is for everyone. because we hire everyone to work here. If you have the talent, we want you to be here no matter what you're wrapped in, no matter if you have to get into a wheelchair to come work here. We want you to come work here. And simply by looking at your company's website or even your MBA program's website, you can probably get to the person who made that website and say, hey, I have a proposal for how we can make our website more inclusive. There's something else that can usually easily be done. Most studies show that the way that women and the way that men look at job descriptions is very, very different. I'll give you a very quick example. Let's say that you have a job description for a web developer, right? Maybe your company's looking for, make something up, a Python developer to work on your next project. And you have 10 things that you want this Python developer to have, right? Most men, and this is how we're socially constructed, will look at the first 8 things, say, I don't know what those are, but I can do these 2 things. I'm qualified, and they will apply. Conversely, most women, and again, there are exceptions, but most women are socially constructed to say, I am an ace at these 8 items. I don't know the last 2. I'm not qualified. I'm not going to apply. And so there are techniques, and again, we can put some into the show notes, and how you can make sure that how you write the job description will be appealing to both how men and women look at job descriptions, and the way that you bullet out those items, the way that you phrase certain things. Like, try to avoid putting master, put experience, or try to avoid terms like rock star. And when you picture a rock star in your head, you don't usually think of a woman, though there are women rock stars and women, rockers. So avoid terms like rock star or a Jedi, which as a tech person, I see a lot of job descriptions. Just say experience, or someone who's had this many years of experience. And that way you help to remove a lot of the bias of your job descriptions in favor of men, and really remove that bias so that it's more of a level job description, so that people who read it both feel equally empowered to apply if they're qualified. So those are 2 small things: your website, your job descriptions, that everyone can do. I mean, you can probably walk down the hall where you're sitting right now and find the person who wrote that job description, who created that website. I also would say that if you only have men writing your job descriptions or making your websites, then that's something that may also be something that you may want to dig into. But those are small things that everyone can do to say, are we projecting the inclusive culture and the inclusive corporation that we think we want to project? And then you can make some changes.
Right. Yeah. No, that's awesome stuff. And I think, like you said earlier, it really starts with awareness. So now we're looking through all the little things that are involved in hiring someone, or in mentoring someone, or in getting someone into a leadership program, and thinking about, what even implicit biases are we kind of bringing up through our language or through our photography. So I think this is really excellent stuff that, like you said, it's actionable today. So I love this, and I wasn't even sure we would get this far in our discussion. So thank you for bringing a lot of practical advice, and also for helping me construct the show notes. So I'd love to share your talk, and to share some of the other materials that we've talked about today. So I also want to be respectful of your time, because we've been going at this for probably almost half an hour now. But I do want to ask you one more thing, and it's a very big question. So is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't? Is there anything that I'm completely missing, where you're an expert, or you have a lot to say on a specific topic, and I just completely omitted it from the discussion?
So one thing that I would say that would be a great question to ask, and I will absolutely answer it, is something that I get, and someone posed this question to me literally like 3 days ago. And that is, I have been able to be fairly successful being a public speaker. And I always tell people, I have a day job. I have plenty to do during the day with what I do to feed my family. But I've been very fortunate to have a couple of talks. Lending Privilege is one of them. I have a couple of leadership talks that have taken me all over the world. You see this map behind me. I'm going to be in Australia, in Melbourne, actually, toward the end of next month, to give a talk at the JavaScript conference in Australia. I went to London twice last year. I went to Budapest, Hungary last year. And people say, how do you do this? How do you become a public speaker? I would love to be flown over the world. These conferences, pay for my flight, they pay for my hotel. They usually give you really good food. There's a speaker dinner and all these great things. And so one question I would say that would be cool to ask is, how do you get into this public speaking thing? And so the first thing I would say is, don't do it to be flown over the world, to be given great food, and to see exotic cities, because that's not the right motivation. Find something that you're passionate about. Find something that you feel that you could talk about all day, that you probably talk about all day for free right now. For me, diversity and inclusion was one, and so my lending privilege talk has taken me literally all over the world. I mean, I've spoken in multiple countries. When I go to Australia, that will be 3 continents I've spoken on with this one talk. And it's because and really how I saw women being treated in tech, I was really passionate about fixing that problem. I was really passionate about making technology the meritocracy that we all want it to be, where everyone feels welcome, everyone feels they can come into this industry. If they have talent, we don't care how your talent looks or what it's wrapped in, bring it into this industry. And so that's why I made my lending privilege talk. So find that passion, find that idea that you want to talk about. Maybe you love some JavaScript API. Maybe you wrote or created some open source project. Find that passion, and I would say start with that. And then realize that you have something to say. People may feel like, well, there's so many other talks about JavaScript, or there's already all these talks about diversity and inclusion, or there's already this talk about whatever your passion is. Yes, there's probably someone who is talking about it, but they're not you. They have not had your lived experiences. They have not come through life with the lens that you lived looking at the world through. And so you have something to share. A restaurant is amazing. Most restaurants that are amazing because they have all these great dishes and they're not all the same. And if they are all the same, then there were probably a lot that people didn't like. By having all these different flavors and spices and cuisines, that's what makes most restaurants fantastic. That's what makes most conferences fantastic. All these people with their perspectives and their lived experiences and their passions, bringing it to an audience. So not only do you have something to say, but you have a stage that's waiting for you to say it on. And there's a whole process that I can't go into here, but keep in mind that conferences and events are looking for people to take the stage. And there's an art and a science to calls for proposals or CFPs and how you can find them, how you can apply to them. But there's a wide field that's looking for speakers. And you may say that, well, I'm not really that great at being a speaker, or I'm an introvert. I'm actually an introvert too. I'm a classical Myers-Briggs INTJ. So I am an introvert. I've spoken all over the world. So what I would say is that find your passion. There's some kind of technical kind of blocking and tackling, to use a sports metaphor, that you have to understand and get good at. But there's a place for you. And I want to encourage everyone here, and I'm sure we'll share how you can contact me on Twitter or even via my website. But if you have any concerns that you may have a passion, but you don't know how to do it, or you're looking for your passion, but you think you can do all these technical things, reach out to me. I will be happy to help you however I can on your journey to the stage.
That's awesome. And I feel like you're speaking directly to me, because I'm an INTP and I'm now starting to kind of look at being more present at conferences and working on some little local workshops and things like that. But at least immediately, it's always really scary for me. But now I have you to hold up as an inspiration as an INTJ who's been able to step out and kind of talk across the world. So thank you.
You have something to say. Believe me, Scott, I know there are many audiences that are waiting for you to come and share. And so, yeah, I'm absolutely here for you.
Awesome, awesome. And you mentioned ways to contact you. For people who are just kind of listening in the car, can we share maybe the two best places to get in contact with you, or your website, for example?
Absolutely. So our website's very easy. I have a different first name, but it's anjuansimmons.com. And so we can put that into the show notes. It's Anjuan. I tell people, think of the capital Puerto Rico, but take off the first S. That's my first name. And you can find me on Twitter again at Anjuan. And that's it. Just 6 letters at Anjuan. Feel free to add me. My DMs are always open. So drop me a DM, whoever you are. And I would love to get to know you and to help you however I can.
Awesome. Thank you again, Anjuan, for your time and for your incredible insight. I'm really looking forward to posting this show and getting feedback and hopefully continuing the conversation. So thank you. Have a
Absolutely.
good day. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Take care.
You too.